So one of the areas that is less well catered for in careers guidance is the creative industry. I suspect this is because that there is no one clear path, and this can make it really tricky for anyone who knows that their future is somewhere in that direction, but isn't really clear where. The aim of this talk today is to provide inspiration and maybe some ideas of where to start if you think a creative path may be for you. So I am thrilled to be joined today by our student host, Sir Carlo, who is going to be leading this discussion. And we are also joined by our panel of speakers today. We have Brogues, who is a creative director and freelance content producer. Ada, who is a production manager, freelance producer and photographer. And Janvier, who is the founder of a company called Minute Shorts. So before we start today, it would be great to hear a little bit more about your roles and your backgrounds. Janvier, I wondered if you could kick us off, if that's okay.
Yeah, so hi. So I'm Janvier Wete. So my role as a founder, as a CEO, is basically just running the company. So it varies, but coming from a creative background, which means that I tend to kind of get involved into a lot of creative decisions as well. So is hiring people, managing the whole team as well, also that can make sure the creative ideas kind of gets delivered, basically. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah.
Brogues, we'll come to you next.
I've been freelancing, broadly speaking, as a freelance creative for nearly 3 years, working across different kinds of industries. So I work in the music industry as a creative and digital director for an artist called Tom Misch. And then I work with creative and advertising agencies doing creative strategy, social media, brand development stuff, and also with some companies like BBC Studios and Talent House doing social media. And I also try and do like photography, hand lettering and illustration on the side, sometimes to make money, but often more as like soul passion projects.
And Ada?
So I'm a production manager at Talent House. I'm also a freelance producer and photographer. I come from an entertainment and film background, so moving into advertising was a little bit of a switch for me, but very exciting. And that's where, as we all know, where the money is. But I'm a freelance music photographer, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. A lot of music community here, a lot of great creative community. So it's great to connect with new photographers, new musicians. And I'm working on creative directing a couple album releases for some artists in the area. So hopefully that all goes well. And if they make it big, then I make it big.
Amazing. Love that. Well, thank you so much to you all for joining us today. I am going to hand over to the wonderful Sick, who is going to lead our discussion and kick us off with the first question.
Thanks, Rachel, for having me. And thank you to this really amazing panel of creatives that have joined us. I'm really excited to pick your brains and see what you guys have to say. So just to actually start off with, I'd like to start with Brogues, because you mentioned that you've done a lot. You've also been to Berlin, and you seem to have worked in different aspects of the creative industry. So what is it really like working in the creative industry? How would you describe it in your experience?
I think in a lot of ways it depends on the different realms within it that you're in and the kinds of like brands or companies and also people that you're working with. So like I do a lot of work with like a smaller creative agency, and that is really different to how it is working with like a big advertising agency that I do work with, and they kind of all offer something different. And I really like having the like diversification of like experiencing those sort of that big ad world where it's very intense. The culture is very intense. I wouldn't necessarily be able to do it 5 days a week, but it's really good to be tapped into that world and like use your brain in that way. Whereas the smaller creative agency that I work with, it's a lot more sort of familial, and like you're sat next to the director of the company, and it's just a lot more chilled by comparison. But I think it's good to have that experience of both and to kind of keep your feet in both places. And then because obviously within the music realm that's like a different kind of thing, and working with independent artists is again very different to working with like a major label artist. So it really varies, but for me what I really love about what I do specifically is the fact that I've got that variety and I can kind of put a different hat on each day, and also each thing that I do helps and informs the other things that I do, and there's a lot of crossover skills that I'm using a lot.
That's great. That's a great answer. Jean-Pierre, you seem to be nodding your head quite a lot. Do you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that?
No. I agree. I agree with Brogues. I think I kept my intro quite brief, and I think so. Before becoming a CEO for the company I run, which I've been running for 3 years, so I was a freelance film director for 10 years, and I directed ads to documentaries, and I worked for Vice and BBC and a few other companies. And I think the good thing about being in the creative industry as a director, photographer, you name it gives it, you don't do one singular thing. You kind of do multiple things at the same time. So as a director, you're a writer, you're sometimes a light technician, you do all the other stuff. So that kind of same elements you are also kind of embodied running a business. So when you run a business, a startup specifically, you're not, if you're a CEO, people think you're just sitting there waiting for people to like, I don't know, you're waiting for whatever to do your work, and then you kind of you have multiple hats on. So it kind of it's the same principles as a freelancer that you embody when you're running a startup. So one day I might be working on maybe because I'm very particular. So sometimes I'll see a creative project we're working on. Whether someone's creating a poster, I'll be like, oh no, I want to get involved in that. To all the way to like financing. I mean, if you're a freelancer, you're pretty much your own finance person as well. So yeah, so the reason I was green bro is like because there's multiple roles as a freelancer, creative person that you're doing.
Definitely.
So it seems like there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do, regardless of what position you are, as compared to your conventional, traditional, let's say, office-based roles where you sort of have one job. Do you feel, Ada, that that's something you enjoy, having that ability to sort of kind of bounce between different departments and different areas, and just developing different skill sets?
Yeah, I have to say, as a production manager at Talent House, you kind of wear a lot of hats all the time. You're working with different teams in the company as well, whether it's the community team, which I used to be a part of as well. So I have a little bit of understanding of like social media, content, or it's the sales team in which you're helping write proposals and coming up with creative ideas for solutions for clients, or you're just working with like your actual freelance creative. So oftentimes I'll hire directors, photographers to kind of execute on campaigns that we've designed with other clients. And I think the overall theme is like the flexibility and like variability still exists in the agency world. There's a lot, every single client is different. All the solutions they want are different. You get to have a lot of flexibility and creativity depending on who you're working with. So I think variety is still like the spice of our lives, even in the advertising industry.
So you guys have like specified so many like great things about working, like we've covered the flexibility of it. But I can imagine for you, especially you, Brogues, you mentioned that you did start being a creative from a very young age. So how did you figure out that this was the path for you in career that you'd pursue?
I think for me, I kind of never envisaged doing anything other than being in the creative space in some capacity. Like I remember being like 4 or 5 and like deciding I wanted to be a landscape photographer, and then I wanted to be like fashion journalist. So I kind of always knew the general area. I didn't have a specific idea of what I wanted to do. That kind of evolved. I kind of definitely had environmental factors because my dad was a freelance photographer. My mum works in like media land, like in TV, and she started out in journalism. So that was kind of all I knew as jobs. So I kind of, that was informed through there for sure without necessarily realizing it. And then it was sort of when I did work experience at a creative agency when I was about 14, that it really, really cemented that like that was the area that I wanted to be in. Again, like my first like proper job was in social media. So like that didn't exist at the time when I was 14, which is weird to imagine now. So like things like social media weren't even a thing that could be a job at the time. So that wasn't something that I was imagining. But I think what really sort of shaped it was just knowing and visualizing the general feeling that I had when I was doing the work and the kinds of people that I wanted to work with. And those are kind of all different kinds of people, but very like-minded in terms of playful, curious. And that was a really key factor for me. And then sort of as I evolved and figured out, actually back to the variety word, like I don't have to choose one thing, and I can work across different industries and still maintain that creativity in some capacity.
Ada, would you agree that you had this sort of like same experience when deciding that this is what you're going to pursue as your career?
Yeah, I think I went through a bunch of different ideas of what I wanted to do as well, similar to Brogues. And I feel like most creative people have that struggle of like kind of figuring out what their path is. And I feel like when I was younger, I was like, I want to be a photographer. That's going to be my goal. And then when college came around, I was like, okay, maybe not photography. Maybe I'll be in media. I'll be in writing. I'll do film. And then I kind of found my way into like the entertainment industry, which led me like to become a producer. I was working at a film studio for a little while as a line producer, but then that led me into the production management here at Talent House. So it was kind of like knowing all of the entire life, just that I was going to be creative and like that was my passion. If I wasn't being creative in my career, I wouldn't be happy, I wouldn't feel fulfilled. And I had to go through some twists and turns to get where I am now, but it's very satisfying to know like I'm on the right path. Like this is what I want to do.
Would you agree if I sort of said that deciding to go in a career in as a creative does not mean you're restricted to being a creative in a specific department, and there's always the opportunity to go from photography to, I guess, like video production, music production, and just like same, like it's not you have to decide that you want to be a photographer for the rest of your life. You still have that flexibility to be able to learn the skill and kind of like progress in it in the later years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would always encourage any creative person to explore other ways of like expressing themselves. You never know what you're going to be really good at. I never thought I would be a production manager. For me, I was like, I really like the creative parts. I really like coming up with new ideas, but then I also realized I'm really good at managing people and organizing things and planning things and coming up with solutions. And that involves a lot of creativity too. So you never know kind of where your creative skills will actually come into play in the future.
That's perfect. And Janvier, as the founder of Minute Shorts, what key things would you say that people should be aware of kind of before making and in the process of making this decision to follow this career path? As
a creative or as a founder?
Well, I'd say as a creative, because I'm assuming
Okay.
not just only you had to decide to be a creative, but you had to commit to like founding a company. And
yeah, I think I think resilient, that's the word. And also kind of, you have to be really strong into your ideas, like as in, so for example, like I think we all can all probably relate today. So as creative, your ideas get bashed a lot. So especially if it's a new idea, it's other people trying to water it down, or not on purpose. Usually people come with their own identity or ideas of like, or how they think your idea should be. So I think if you're trying to get into the creative industry, you have to be kind of like a certain, this is my vision and no one's going to change it in that aspect. So, and I think that resilience and also like very strong minded in terms of your idea, it should be something that you should be kind of aware of. And also another thing I kind of want to point out is that things also takes a long time. I think a lot of creative people, sometimes, you think, oh, be creative today or create something today, then tomorrow it becomes successful or become, known. Is no, sometimes it takes like 3-4 years for something to kind of pick up. Because again, I always think creative people will visionaires. We tend to sometimes think things that are actually exist. Yeah. So we think maybe sometimes 2-3 years ahead, maybe the culture or the community or the world hasn't caught up yet. So I think patience and it's also very, very kind of like a important thing to have.
Do you feel that the aspect of resilience just comes with like consistency and, like you mentioned, patience as well? Do you feel like those are aspects which contribute, just carry like continuing to just persist and persist at your goal?
I think it comes with that, but also it comes with that. For example, if you do something, whether the result is small or big, when it works, then okay, cool, I can do this. I can do more. So then persistence comes from like your previous efforts. That gives you kind of like the backbone. It's like, cool, I can work on the next level of things, and the next level of things, it might take, I don't know, a few years time, but you've done it. You've done something before. So I think my kind of advice always with young people is like trying to, whatever it is, do something that you feel, it can literally be the smallest thing. It could be a video you just put on YouTube, do it there. And even if 2-3 people like it, or people that really feel, like the vibe, that feeling in itself is what's going to carry you to the next level. So persistence comes from like just doing more stuff, whether big or small.
And Brogues, I wanted to touch on something that was mentioned about creatives having, well, I'm assuming it's a very common experience amongst creatives, like your ideas are rejected, or you might have a really great idea and the person you're pitching it to doesn't take it. How do you feel that you've kind of used that to your advantage?
Well, that's a good question, because I was going to say that I'm definitely still working on that as a process, because innately I just tend to take things personally. And I think especially when it's like your creative work and it's your brainchild and it's like it's filled up your notebooks, I think when it's being like bashed around, it can hurt, to like put it bluntly. And it's quite tricky when you're like a sensitive person that takes things personally, to deal with that. But I think what has kind of helped me, A, is that, as mentioned, the persistence, but B, it's just actually feeling those feelings and being like, okay, why do I feel like this? And like kind of removing yourself when you need to from the idea, because I think sometimes we as creatives, like almost we put ourselves so much into our work that then we kind of confuse them as like melded together. And sometimes feedback and idea generation, and like that's so important for the evolution of a creative idea, and it isn't always just about your idea, it's also a collaborative effort. So yes, I could do like a solo project on my own and like have full confidence in it and do it, but most of the time I'm working collaboratively. So actually welcoming that feeling of like, oh, that doesn't like feel that nice, but actually then sort of riding out those feelings and being like, this could actually be really beneficial for this project at hand. And I wouldn't have necessarily had this idea that has kind of sprung off my initial idea, and it gets to a better place than it probably would have if it was only me working on it.
That's great. I think we've kind of like seen that. Well, I guess if I was a young person watching this right now, I'd sort of realize that there will be times where I will have ideas which I consider to be like award-winning, and they may not get taken on board and stuff like that. But the ability to have resilience, and also maybe with what Brogues was saying, to sort of not fully attach yourself, but still be committed to it in a sort of weird way, in a way that you'll be able to potentially handle rejection of the idea and stuff like that. Ada, do you feel you have any things that I guess you would make someone aware of before they make a decision to become a creative?
I think one of the biggest things that kind of has helped me in my career is my community. Having a support system, having people who understand your ideas, who you can communicate with effectively, who encourage you to grow, encourage you to take risks, to stay resilient, to keep pushing your ideas, and encouraging you to like try new things and bringing new ideas to your own mind. That's definitely the biggest thing as a creative. Like we all like take our creativity very personally. Sometimes it can be very intimate, and you can be very sensitive because you are so attached to your ideas. But the people around you are always going to be the ones who feed you and are feeding your creativity and are pushing you to work harder. And same for the people you surround yourself with. Like those are the people who are going to be with you, support your ideas. I think that's like something that I didn't really realize when I first started off trying to pursue a creative career, like thinking that I had to do everything by myself, that everything, all the dreams and ideas I have to come to life through me. But I realized like collaborating with people and like being open to ideas and surrounding yourself with people who work well with you and who like encourage your creativity is like the best thing you can do for yourself as a creative.
That's great. And that actually brings a little light in my head, which I wanted to ask Janvier. I know that I'm aware that you met your co-founder through, I don't know how to pronounce it, Quora, the website. Quora, I'm sorry. Yeah. So in terms of like meeting other creatives and sort of establishing a support network, what advice would you give? Because I can imagine knowing anyone, you wouldn't know where to start with meeting other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice is like, you kind of have to be very open-minded about it. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the idea of like finding collaborators, whether it's a partner or someone to work with in your creative projects, that you have to be really open-minded. Sometimes I think in many cases for me, what has worked is, it's a weird one because I think the people that I've collaborated with, I've never thought I'll be collaborated with. So I always think I'll collaborate with people, this sort of person, or I'll find this person in this sort of events or this sort of kind of like places. But I think you should always kind of keep keep it open-minded that an idea or person to work with, it can come from anywhere. So for example, my business partner, I found him in this website, which I've only used once. That's the first time I've used it. And that's the first time because I was looking for someone to work with me on this business idea, and I went on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, because I knew these are the places I can find people who are like-minded to me. But then I went on this other website, which is Quora, which is even unheard of. Then I found someone who I've been working with for the last 4 years now. So I think, yeah, so I think just keep an open mind that you need to explore, not explore just things close to you, explore things even further in order to find those creative people.
Another thing that young people do worry when thinking about the future is people weigh up being a creative against the financial security of a more traditional route. So in kind of a world that I'd say some people would consider less financially stable, Ada, what would you kind of like say to that?
Go into advertising. That's kind of I know it's kind of a joke, but also it's kind of serious sometimes. Unfortunately, like I would love to just be a music photographer only. That's all I do, but I can't afford to pay for the gear, to pay for productions. If I don't have the resources already, personally, there's ways to like find your creative medium and take it to a more financially lucrative situation. Advertising obviously is like not ideal for some people. It can seem, very corporate. I'm very lucky to be at Townhouse, which is we have a really great work culture. We're all friends with each other. I work from home. We have an office, but obviously in the middle of the pandemic now, we're not there. But it's a very interesting application. Like sometimes you kind of have to have a side hustle. Sometimes your side hustles are your passion. Sometimes they're not. But it's like the willingness to like stay focused on the fact that there's an end goal. And sometimes you have to take a detour, and that's okay. As long as you can stay focused and you're surrounded by people who support you. Sometimes you got to take a barista job. Sometimes you have to be a waitress. I've been there before, freelancing as a line producer, working at a coffee shop, and then, also being a waitress at the same time. It's stressful and it's hard, but like, unfortunately, that's like sometimes the reality of like getting started in a creative career.
I think as well, just to riff off that, I think that's one thing that I've really seen during the past year, because I've know lots of people that were in sort of secure full-time jobs who weren't in those and were furloughed. So actually it's really underlined to me like how great it is to be, because I've been fortunate enough to stay in work this past year, and I really credit diversifying my income sources to that. I'm working across different industries that are going to be affected in different ways, but also not just being dependent on one source of income is so key. And like Ada said, kind of doing the work that can earn the money more effectively, but also making those little side hustles where you're kind of even like passively earning some income, so you're not dependent on one source, is I think the most important thing for sort of so-called stability. That it kind of is a little bit of a myth, but the most stable that you can control, I guess.
And Rose, to piggyback off that point, would you say that expanding your skill set will allow you to sort of diversify all these income streams?
Definitely. I think curiosity comes into it as well. It's like if you have that curious spark towards something and it feels right, like go towards it and like learn and devour content around it. And if you decide you want to get into photography, like look at all the different kind of photographers and artists that you love in terms of like being able to develop your own eye, and figure out what you like about those specific artists and why. I think having those different skill set is so key, especially in like this world. Like unless you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something more traditional, I think we really need to be flexible and like diversifying in every kind of way.
Janvier, I'm assuming you had the same experience with having to work a numerous amount of different jobs that you, I guess at the start, wouldn't have pictured yourself doing.
Oh no, honestly, I think I think as a freelancer, yes, I think one thing I've always told people that just be aware that you need to be financially stable first, so it kind of brings peace of mind. So whether that, like what Ada said, whether you have to work in the kitchen, whether you have to work in a bar on the weekend, whatever it is, so you need to have kind of a baseline of financial stable. You can afford to pay your rent, your bills. Then on top of that, and then you can start freelancing, working on stuff that will bring you more joy. So I think having that baseline of like having enough money, whether you have to pick up a corporate job, because corporate jobs usually they're not sometimes exciting. It could be like you're doing I've done editing for, I don't know, a talk for 2 hours. You're cutting this like a talk for 2 hours, but it's not exciting, but it pays the bills. So I have that first as the baseline, whether it's a corporate job, whether it's a work in a cafe, wherever it is. And on top of that, then anything that you want to do that's more kind of like a more creative, exciting, then by all means go ahead. And also, one thing I wanted to add in regards to having the flexibility of work. So recently, I said the last maybe 2-3 years. So I think as a creative person, your job, you don't have to be one person. So you don't have to be just a photographer or filmmaker. So in life, you can be literally multiple things. And I think like in the last 2 years, once I kind of registered that idea in my head, even though I am a creative, or even though I'm a founder of a tech company, I also do stuff on the side, like DJing. I also do painting and stuff on the sides. But I do that. I mean, they started like a side hustle, and I also do them along the side of everything I'm doing with running a business. So I think as a person, you don't have to be stuck into one career path. It can be multiple things in a life. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that.
I think that's one very valuable piece of information that as young people we don't realize, and we forget that even if we make a decision at the age of 16 or 18 as to what course we're going to study or whether or not we're going to go to uni, that's not going to define the next X amount of years as our life. And there's always that opportunity to grow and develop in different sort of areas and skill sets. And I did actually want to ask, like, you guys are all very inspiring in the sense that I know for a fact you've done like so many different jobs to keep pursuing your dreams. So would you say that passion is a very integral aspect when deciding your career path? Because I can imagine there must have been times, I've worked retail before, and there are times where I've been like, oh my gosh, like, can't do this anymore, why am I doing this? But I can imagine passion sometimes has like kept you going. And would you say there are any sort of like other aspects which have, like, when you're working, let's say the job in the retail store or the job at the coffee shop, are there any things which you've sort of said to yourself to keep you going, or things you've done to like keep you pursuing your dream? I'll start with Ada.
Sure. Actually, working in coffee shops is what really ignited my love for photography. I was always I was working in a coffee shop after college, not really knowing where I was going, what my next step was going to be. And a customer came in, and she was the senior photo editor of Vice. I didn't know that at first, but I got close to her. She was just a regular, so I talked to, and she would see me carrying around a camera because I would just take it with me with my friends to snap photos on the street. And it was very casual. She asked me if I was a photographer. I said, yeah, kind of. I showed her my website, which I had just in case something like this happened. And she emailed me, and she's like, I'm the senior photo editor of Vice. I would love for you to shoot some profiles for us. That was like the kind of kickoff for me to start calling myself a photographer again. Because I think I did lose that passion at some point, trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a creative. But then something reignited it, and there was that fire in me that I've always loved photography. It's always been something I've been very talented in, very passionate about. Even when I'm bad at it, I wanted to improve. And then meeting her was a very serendipitous moment that kind of reminded me that I am a photographer still, even though I'm not calling myself that now. I can choose to call myself a photographer whenever I want to. And making that decision to like call yourself something is something that it's life-changing, to decide that this is who you are, and then to follow.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that, Ada. So it's not to cut in. I think calling yourself, like, it's kind of you kind of validates before you even start, right?
You manifest.
Yeah, that's the most important part. Like, yeah, it's more important that you call yourself something, you know what you are, rather than having someone else call you that. I don't care if someone's going to call me a music photographer or a production manager. I know that I am a music photographer and a producer and a creative. And that was like, oh my God, I am. I convinced myself.
Well, I find that really interesting, because in as much as the job you were working wasn't, I guess, directly related to being a creative, you were able to find ways, and especially through meeting people, because I guess you never know who you'll run into. Would you say, Brogues, you've experienced that of, I guess, like working a job which wasn't directly correlated, but it being very beneficial to you now as a creative?
Definitely. I think because like you, I was in retail when I was like in my teens, like 16 through to 19, but actually some of those relationships that I made while I was there, because we were all kind of at a similar point in our lives and all working retail, because that's kind of what you can do when you're 16, 17, 18. But like, it turned out that all of us actually ended up going into the creative industry. We worked in Covent Garden, so that was kind of like a hub of London anyway. You had people from all different kinds of spheres come in and out. But then also, yeah, like some of my closest friends who came from that job are now like music artists, they're film directors, they're all doing really great stuff. And I think one of the key things, just applicable to this career trajectory in general, is just to always be forming those good relationships, those real relationships, and maintaining them, because you never know where they might lead. And also just like being a really nice person is so crucial and shouldn't be underestimated, and treat everyone well, because you have no idea what they're going to do or where they're going to go, and just be like a genuine person, I think is so key. And as much as like having the skills is important, just as important is your reputation and your relationships, because those are the things that are going to help you level up and form a really strong and real support network that ultimately helps you when you're on a rise. If you have a little fall, like, I think that is the most important thing to maintain.
My gosh, you're giving me gems. This doesn't just benefit young people. I think this benefits everyone. On the topic of career trajectory, actually, what would you say was the one thing that made a game-changing difference to your success, Rose?
I think going back to my work experience when I was 14, so that was at an advertising agency. And while I was there, they kind of gave me tasks for their different clients that probably weren't originally for them to actually use. It was kind of to keep me busy and engaged. And there was like some stuff for Mercedes, some stuff for Cadbury's, and then they kind of ended up using some bits that I was doing. I was like messing around on GarageBand doing like sound production. Never done it before, but they ended up using it for this like A-class campaign. And then a few weeks later, after I finished work experience, they called me back for this project that they were working on with Cadbury's. And so they ended up hiring me as like a freelance sound engineer for 2 weeks, and paid me really well for a 14, 15-year-old. And like from that moment, it just instilled so much confidence in me, because I had no idea what I was doing. Like if someone came to me now and was like, can you be a freelance sound engineer for me? Like I flat out say no. But I think because I was in that like youthful naivety of just being like, oh, they think I can do it, so I'm just going to do it. And then from there, the guy that I worked with at the advertising agency, he formed his own creative agency, and then brought me in sort of part-time when I was in my school holidays, my uni holidays. That kind of paid my way through uni, and I still work with him now regularly. So I think that is an example of like those kind of little moments that, like, I did work experience with lots of places, but that was the one that really changed the game for me, because it introduced me to people who are still like some of my closest friends now and collaborators. So sometimes it does take that kind of one thing that at the time you don't realize is that significant, but in hindsight I'm like, actually so many people and relationships that I have, so many projects that I've worked on, they wouldn't have happened unless I'd done that work experience at 14.
I feel like taking that leap of faith and just that ability to, I guess, say yes can sometimes, like, you have such a ripple effect and still benefit you in your career now. Ada, would you say there were any wonderful moments which really kind of defined and like helped you sort of like, I can't think of the word, sorry, but just
yeah, no, it's okay. I feel like there were a lot of little moments, and as to piggyback off what Brogue said, there are like the moments seem so insignificant when they're occurring, and you don't realize the kind of domino effect that they have over the course of your life. You know, working at that coffee shop and then meeting Elizabeth at Vice, and then shooting something started me on PAing for people on video shoots, and then photographers, and that led me into line producing at an entertainment studio because I met people through those jobs. And so it's like building the connections, having these little moments where you kind of pivot your creativity and learn to adapt your creativity in different ways. I think you realize in those after years later, I now realize like, oh, that pivotal moment in the coffee shop led me into the film world and the entertainment industry, which then led me to advertising, where I am now. And now I'm returning to like the photography and music world. That always comes full circle. We never realize how important those very little things are. Being nice to Elizabeth, who used to come into my coffee shop every day, triggered this. And then working with a photographer named Cooper, who's an advertising photographer here in New York. He works with like New York Mag, with like New York Times. Working with him allowed me to meet a lot of new people that offered me new opportunities as well. And I think those little small, I can't name how many times I've had like pivotal moments that have kind of really pushed me to where I am now. I think every moment can be pivotal as long as you put the emphasis into it and you take care of like how you're acting and how purposeful you're being with the things that you're doing and the choices that you make.
That's great advice. And I think the things that we've touched on have been like very inspirational. And I think like one thing which really has like rung in my head quite a lot is be nice. And it's something my sister says to me, because it's free to be nice. It doesn't cost a thing to be nice. What would you say to people who, or as a founder of a company yourself, what would you say to people who believe this route is impossible for them, think that they won't have the support, think that they won't be able to pursue it long term and, let's say, financially as well? What would you tell them, me as a 16-year-old young person?
You know, it's crazy thing. So I got into, so I remember when I was maybe 15, 16 as well, I was in a school assembly, and there was a guy who came in, he was giving a talk about running his own business. And I think that it's always been in the back of my head that I want to, at some point in my life, to kind of run a business or something I feel passionate about. But kind of an advice to give to young people watching this is, listen, we live in an internet age, so anything is literally possible. So regards to kind of learning how to, things you don't know, you can literally learn anything online. So I'm a very kind of like a new age thing. I've learned a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I've also read a lot of stuff, and also talking to people who ask. Also, yeah, most important, hang around with people you look up to, and also hang around people that are smarter than you. You learn a lot of stuff. And I've learned 90% of my stuff from talking to people, and also like online. So I haven't been to any academic school or business school to learn about what I know now. It's literally talking to people and online. So I think anything, especially in this internet age, information age that we live in, anything's possible.
And Brogues, what would you say to the non-believers?
I guess similar to Jean-Pierre, it's about really starting with what you have, and you don't need the fanciest, most expensive tools. Like, if you're fortunate enough to have the internet, there is so much at your disposal. I actually got my sort of first proper job when I moved to Berlin, off the back of the fact that I had a blog. I had way less experience than the person I was up against, but I had consistently shown that I was invested in the subject that I was about to enter into. And I think that really showed me it's really about already doing the work for the space that you want to be in. So don't wait for the opportunity to come to you. Start, if you want to get into sports photography for Nike or for Adidas, whatever brand that you want to work for, find how your vision and your mission connects to that and start making the work accordingly. And then you are kind of building up the portfolio for the specific realm that you want to enter into. And I think that's really key, just being able to practically demonstrate how into what you're saying you're into you are. And then when it comes to presenting your work for specific opportunities, you've got a ready-made kind of book, whether it's online or physical, that you can utilize and help give you those opportunities.
And Ada, I'll leave it to you to wrap it up with the last answer.
I would say I have probably 3 points. It would be community. Surround yourself with the right people who will encourage you to grow, to create your opportunities for yourself, whether that's what Brogue said, where you start creating portfolios for the career you want to go into, or whether it's just saying yes to opportunities whenever they present themselves. And then also being kind to people. Your reputation is your entire career. That's your business card. That's how people know you. If you're not kind, people don't want to work with you. If you have poor reflection on set when you're doing anything at all, people aren't going to continue working with you or collaborating with you. That's really seeing artists with big egos is probably one of the biggest turnoffs to me. I don't want to work with those people. Those aren't people that I feel will kind of help propel your career. They're the kind of people who will kind of try to take from you. So my advice is just to give as much of yourself as you can to it and do it with confidence. Follow through with it, and don't let anyone convince you that you're not a photographer or a producer or a musician. If that's what you want and that's what you really believe you are, then that's all that really matters.
Amazing.
Well, look, guys, all of the answers you've given are great, and I just want to thank every single one of you. You've inspired me, and I know for a fact you'll inspire so many young people with this talk.
A huge thanks to you, Sick, for being our host today and doing a great job with our panelists, Jean-Pierre, Brogues and Ada. It has been such an interesting discussion to just sit back and listen to, and hopefully lots of food for thought for our students watching. So if you are considering a future in the creative industry, hopefully today has given you some inspiration and really critical advice on how you can start your own journey into making it there. Thanks for watching.
Okay, cheers. Thank you, guys. Thank you.